So we're live now. Yeah.
Good evening, friends, and welcome back to the show Mirror Wisdom Reflected. Generally, I found that people are strangers in the mirror. Either they have low self esteem or have a very pompous ego. But most often, they are strangers in the mirror. They can't identify themselves. So, here in our show, Mirror Wisdom Reflected, I'm acting as a mirror to get the best out of technocrats, intelligentsia, people who matter, the celebrities, what exactly happened in their life, how they took their turns, what made them so successful, what were the changes in their career, how have they contributed to the society, and what is it that I can learn in the next half an hour so that I can be more wiser than what I was this evening. Welcome back after a great success of the school show, the work from school and online schooling. We have a very interesting session today with the corona epidemic. Everything was the work from home came, school also effectively was from home, online schooling came up, and of course banking was always open, and you didn't have to go and queue up in the banks. Everything was online. You had all your ATMs, everything working, and the system could not collapse. The financial system was working, the stock markets were working. So one thing the government was made very sure was that the financial system was working very clearly, and everybody had to go online. Now, once you go online, a lot of people who were not even used to that started going online. And that's where the mess started. And huge amount of data theft, money hacking, ATM, people having a lot of hacked money. And regularly we kept reading in the newspaper, some elderly gentleman lost this much money. Somebody was swayed on a call or on an email and they lost a couple of $1,000s. This is what happens. We are absolutely blind in this world. Beyond our computer we can't see that. When you leave your house, you know that you lock your doors, you know that you'll close all the windows, you have your alarms, the digital alarm going on, you will have your cameras peeping into your rooms. But little do we know in that big cyberspace what is going on. It's a huge space where you are lost and people could take advantage of that. I remember seeing that movie, where Catherine Zeta-Jones and Sean Connery, Entrapment, and that at midnight on the 31st of December, when the day is changing and there's music all over, they empty the whole bank with all the money transferred to their account. This is not a whiff of imagination. It's been happening. There has been hackers who have done that, and bitcoins until the time we get into blockchain system in all the banking areas, somebody can hack yourself. And unless you remember your passwords, and most often than not, people write down 1 2 3 4 5 or their birth date or their initials, and that's where the whole problem starts. So to reduce our anxiety and to make us understand what is going on, what is exactly happening in the hacking world, how can you protect yourself, what all schemes are going on, and how people get into your information, your data theft. The biggest thing is your data theft. I was shocked when all Aadhaar card details were absolutely gone in no time. You had such big hacks happening in big companies from Instagram to Facebook. And I think, Sudarshan might agree with me. Most of my data and your data is online. How can we protect ourselves after that is something very important. Sudarshan Pispati is a security specialist and our chief guest today. He's a top red team or hacking expert. He developed an interest in cybersecurity when he was in college and completed his master's degree in information security from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, one of the most famous universities, Johns Hopkins, Baltimore. He was hired as a white hat hacker by Ernst and Young. Now that's interesting. You do hacking and you can get a good job and being paid for also doing wrong things. So I love that. That's a wonderful thing that Sudarshan had. It's like catch me if you can. That guy did everything wrong in this world, and then he was hired by the police to catch the other hackers who were doing in the system. So that's interesting. So he was employed with Ernst and Young for Advanced Security Center in Houston. During this time, he carried about over 500 official hacking assignments where he used his hacking skills to break into some of the largest companies in the world. You're being hired by Ernst& Young to break into largest companies. It could be Enron, it could be whichever company you could think of. So Sudarshan today is the chief technology evangelist at Smokescreen Technology, where he has been built and operates a hacker outfit that brought high-end hacking expertise into India. He also uses his expertise in hacking to help build Smokescreen flagship security product. He educates companies about how hackers operate and how to defend them. He has been rated as a five-star trainer at Black Hat, the most prestigious security system in Los Angeles. It's a pleasure to have you here, Sudarshan. Thank you for sparing your valuable time.
Thank
With
you, doctor.
such great credentials, it's wonderful to learn how can we protect ourselves as common men. Welcome to the show, and thanks for being with us. A few words.
Very, very happy to be here. Um, Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking shop with everybody who's online and who's going to watch this later. I hope that there are some very good takeaways from this. And I'm really, really happy to be here. Thanks for giving me the opportunity, Doc.
Thanks so much. To let me start with the easiest thing. How often we've seen your credit card suddenly you get a big debit card. It's not your wife doing it, but suddenly you realize that in your account so much money has been withdrawn or somebody has cashed it out somewhere else, and you're sitting in Bombay and somebody is doing a transaction in Los Angeles.
Correct.
Explain what happens and how can I avoid it?
Sure. Okay. So it's interesting, this particular scenario. All things considered, the job that we've done as a country around uh, doing the best we can to protect transactions is pretty good, because if you see locally, if you want to do any transaction, you need an OTP. It doesn't matter whether you're shopping on Amazon or you're going to be purchasing something on some other website or doing a bank transfer. To even log into your bank, I mean, you need OTPs. That same standard is not enforced elsewhere. Okay. Now remember that while in this mechanism of having OTPs operates within our country, the place where our credit cards and debit card information is actually being stored is online. Okay. And online there are no national borders online, right? So a hacker sitting anywhere in the world, if they are able to, for example, break into the database that holds all this card information, in foreign countries, all you need is actually just to know the CVV and the credit card number. So when you spoke about this specific scenario where you say, hey, how is it that somebody's swiping the card in Los Angeles? That's usually because this card details have already been compromised somewhere. It's out there on the internet now. A malicious entity has gotten hold of these card details, and now they are using it, at a Target or a Costco, and at some point your bank's going to realize, like, hey, I just saw this guy do a transaction here in Mumbai and also in Los Angeles. Let me alert him. And then they put a stop to that activity. But, damage has been done to a certain degree, to a certain extent. And that's really how that happens, that the card details are already leaked online. And you will see that the immediate follow-up from the bank is they're going to issue you a new debit card, right? Or a credit card. They'll say, you cannot use that anymore. We're blocking this, and we'll give you something completely new. And that's why that happens, primarily because outside of the country, the same standards are not enforced.
I totally agree with you. In the US, I remember while doing my post graduation with it, that it is so simple. I wanted to book a movie ticket or I wanted to go to IMAX. I just had to give my credit card details, and people give it so freely,
Yeah,
without questions being asked, and it was never thought about second time.
yeah. Funnily, a lot of the card hacks that happened. There was a really big incident against Target Corporation back in the day, and pretty much anybody who had swiped their card at a Target anywhere in the United States, they had their card details captured. Because the hackers had broken in and they had taken control of this one central location where card data gets processed, and they were just picking off card numbers from there and then going and trying it out, in the actual stores, and if it was working for them, great. They got to make purchases, and then a ton of money was spent, creating new credit cards, more plastic, just putting all of that stuff out there. It's a lot more costlier than just the monetary value that an individual uses. When you put that all together, those are some pretty gargantuan amounts of money that get lost in such hacks.
So India is very fortunate. It's not actually a pain to get an OTP and you have to do it twice. but it's the best security system that we have in this country. It's protecting us phenomenally. In the US, I'm not as protected because there's a double security check on my OTP. If I enter from my cell phone the OTP, so it's definitely an advantage. Is that right?
That Yeah, it's definitely an advantage. In security parlance, it's what you call two-factor authentication, where you say basically that, just because you gave me a username and password, that's not sufficient, because I'm going to assume that somebody else could have your password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a piece of information on something that should ideally be in your physical possession, like your phone. And basis that, I will make a decision whether to allow you continued access into the system. And that is a very fundamental concept in security, which has been well implemented. That actually makes for a very interesting attack scenarios. The primary one being, you might notice that when your bank sends you any kind of a notification, the first thing that they tell you is, don't share your OTP with anybody, right? Because what you're basically going to do if you share that OTP with anyone is you're giving away your second factor of authentication. It's your second line of defense, and that second line of defense goes. The awareness about this it is varying, right? It depends upon the level of technical education that people have and the interaction that they've had with technology so far, that allows them to guide with such decisions. So if you use technology all the time, an OTP inherently is very important, but that's not necessarily the case for everybody.
So a corollary to this question, I'm swiping my card in a restaurant, or I am at the gas station, I'm giving my card. How do I protect? Somebody could take a picture, or there are cameras everywhere. They could be taking a picture of that.
Absolutely.
And in a restaurant, he takes your card, he swipes it, he gets it back. Somebody could very easily take my CVV number at that point in time. How do I protect myself?
Yeah, sure. So the same problem, right? So right now, at least in this country, just having the credit card and the CVV number is insufficient. There are a few things that you can do. Okay. The one thing is you can set transaction limits. Okay, a lot of banks allow this now. Okay, so make sure that you set it to something that's reasonable, that you have an appetite for. So even if on the off chance there's something that unforeseen, because of which your card gets swiped, or your card gets stolen for that matter, the amount of damage that happens is limited, so you don't lose all your money. Okay, so that's probably the most important thing that you need to do. Keeping an eye on transactions that are happening, enable the notifications, on your SMS and your email as well. So even if your phone is lost, you still have the secondary notification going into your email, which you can access through your computer if your phone is lost. But pretty much sort of be a little more conscious about how, whether you have your card on you, say at the end of the day you don't have it, call the bank, tell them to block it, right? Just being a little more proactive with that is sort of really the only real thing that you can do.
So is it true that you should have a separate account in your bank with minimum amount, maybe say 50,000 or 100,000 bucks in that, so that you don't lose from your savings account money? So there should be, the credit card should be linked to an account which has got limited amount of funds. Is that correct? Is that what one should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's what these are basically defensive measures. Okay, and defensive measures is completely down to your appetite. Okay, if you are somebody who deals in huge amounts of money, okay, then this is a very prudent step, right? Because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So having two accounts definitely helps, and using that as your primary transaction based account. That's where you get a joint account, and so your family also uses that, and then you keep topping that up. It's almost like a prepaid card, and you always only have that amount available. So worst case, that's the outer limit of your risk, right? And I think that's a really good solution as well.
One of the biggest problems and challenges is remembering your passwords. Everybody has a huge problem remembering password.
Yeah.
And the other challenge is, most often than not, all this data is stored on your cell phone. Somewhere to remind you of what is going on, you store it on your cell phone.
Correct.
And that is the biggest mistake. Am I right, or can I protect myself? Then I'll come to Android and the iOS system.
Yeah. So I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can
Yeah.
hear you well.
Okay. Uh, this is one of the most phenomenal problems in security. It scales up from individual right up to corporates. People writing down their password. Okay. In your own regular everyday life, you have probably 10 different passwords. You have one for Amazon, you have one for Flipkart, you have one for groceries, you have one for your banking, you have one for your email. So the number of passwords have become um, you know far more than you can manage, right? And so the natural thing to do is to be able to write it down. Okay. um, People write it down on their own computers and store it in a text file or a doc file. Okay. That's not ideal. Okay. uh, the current solutions for this problem right now is what you call a password manager. There's a ton of them out there, and many of them are free. Okay, completely free to use. And they are cross-platform. What that means is you can use it either, or you have the same app on your Mac, on your Windows, and on your iOS, your Apple, and your Android, and they will all sort of work together, and you'll have your passwords available to you at all times. Okay. The way this system works is, as you try to sign up for a new website, it creates an arbitrarily long, complex password that you cannot even say. It's just a string of numbers, letters, and special characters. Okay. And it makes sure that it is individually unique for every website. So let's say that you logged into Amazon and then you logged into net banking. This software will actually tell you, hey, you're using the same password at both places. And that's not ideal. You want to change this to something else, and we'll help you with that, and we'll put this really long password for you. And that's the best solution right now, to be able to manage these kind of passwords in your day-to-day life. And because it's seamless, it doesn't matter. As long as the app's on your phone and it's there on your computer, you always have access to your passwords.
Sudarshan, now comes the point. This is the biggest bait. Giving me a free app to manage my password is the dream of a hacker.
Right. Right.
He only could float a website,
Mm.
and he could have an app going on, and he will have all my passwords, and so
Yeah.
also so many millions of people. Because back again, let's accept it. Most people like taking down apps which are free. Nobody wants to pay for the apps.
Yeah.
So how do I protect myself? Are they encrypted? How do I know whether it's encrypted end to end?
Correct. So this is a very interesting question. Okay. Because how can you know? You can't really ever know. Okay. For example, you might ask that same question about, like, how do I know that Google is not reading all my emails, right? And Google might come out and say, here's our privacy policy and here's how we do security around your email, right? But ultimately, whether that's actually going into practice, uh, is something that why companies hire people like me to go in and check, is this really happening, right? Or is this just all on paper, right? uh, with regards to the apps that I spoke to you about, there are, go for the, there's a few popular ones. Okay. And they have been tested. The security community at large picks up on these apps, and they find bugs, and they report these bugs. It's called what you call a bug bounty program. Companies saying, hey, you know what? In the interest of being more open and transparent with my security, why don't you take the leeway to hack into my app? Okay. And if you find something, not only will we pay you for it, we'll also put your name on the website to give you the credit for it. And at the same time, we'll implement the fix in a reasonable amount of time, because security is always evolving. Okay. Um, so in this cases, how these applications really work is, yes, absolutely, they are encrypted. Okay. Now, encryption is not just, it's encrypted on your phone. Okay. It's encrypted while the data is being transferred from your phone to the company, and it's also encrypted on the company's servers itself. So it's encrypted end to end, right? And breaking encryption is just not possible. I mean, it's a mathematically impossible problem.
Prime numbers. Prime numbers.
It's got its basis in prime numbers. And really, in encryption, what happens is you need a key, okay, to be able to decrypt something, okay. Um, and so most companies are using something like this. In order to just introduce something that's probably a little fundamental to how most of maybe the audience is used to really understanding this thing about passwords, okay. um, to really understand what happens when you type in your username and password, let's talk about the logic of what happens, right? So you put in your username and password, say on an Amazon, okay. Now what happens is uh, they look up your username in the database, and then they compare your password to the password that you created at the time of registration, and if the passwords are the same, it allows you in, right? uh, Now, imagine that you are the person who's operating this database. Somebody has to maintain the database, right? So, what happens as a result of this is now there is a risk that the person who's administering the database can see everybody's password, right? Because it's stored there. So, for this purpose, I'm going to introduce a term. It's called hashing, okay. And what hashing does is it takes your password and does a mathematical calculation over it, and just outputs this really long string, okay, and stores the string. The thing is, you cannot reverse the string back into the password, okay. So that's how currently all organizations are storing passwords through a mechanism called hashing, not encryption. Encryption means you take a piece of text and you put a key on it, and it gives you what is called ciphertext, and you can put that same key back on the ciphertext and you get back the plain text. But in hashing, it's one way. That means once the string has been computed, you should theoretically have no way to figure out what was the word or the set of characters that allowed this one number to actually, this long string to be generated, which makes it a lot difficult for hackers to get their hands on the password itself. And that's how actually these passwords are being stored, okay.
So what is the safest way to make a password for a common man?
Okay, the
How
safest
often
way.
should we? How often should we change our passwords?
Okay, so there recently Microsoft came out with a piece of research that said that according to their data, there is no significant uh, improvement of security that you get by routinely changing your password. If you fulfill the prerequisite that you have a fairly strong password, okay. The strength of the password, let's make it really simple, okay. um, the best mechanism is to choose a phrase, okay. Choose three words that are there in your mind right now, okay. And just take those three words, put dashes between them, okay. Add a number somewhere in between, and put a couple of exclamation marks somewhere, okay. Three words, this could be three completely random words, right. And sort of put these three words together or four words together and create your password out of that. It makes it something that you can remember, right. um, and what that does is it increases the length of your password, okay. Password length is a very critical factor for trying to protect your password even when it's stored somewhere. The reason for this is there is an attack called a brute force attack. Okay, the brute force attack basically means that I'm going to cycle through every possible combination of letters and numbers. Okay, so if you have 8 characters, right, for me to brute force 8 character passwords, which have, for example, let's say you only have letters and numbers, right? That means I have to choose, say, 26 letters, right, and 9 numbers, right? No, 10 numbers, and then just cycle through all the combinations on 8 characters. With current computing power, you can do that in a matter of minutes to hours. Okay, now you add a special character. Now you've increased the possibility space. Okay, so not just increasing the type of character, so use uppercase, use lowercase, use numbers, use special characters. But the single biggest impact to password strength is increasing its length, because the number of combinations you will have to cycle through will be that much more. And it's exponential. So if it takes hours to break an 8-character password, it will take days to break 9-character passwords, years to break tens, hundreds of millions of years to break 11. And the sun will die before it starts hitting the 15, 16 mark, right? And that's why the biggest that's why the biggest possible thing that you can do to improve your password is take it above 15 characters. Don't even think about it.
Wow. And not repeat that in two separate websites. Not the same for Hotmail or Gmail,
Correct.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Don't repeat your passwords.
Correct. Correct. Because let's say that you're now signed up on a website, and this thing that I spoke to you about, hashing, right?
Yeah.
Let's say the company does not do that.
Yeah.
They stood up and they did not do that. Now that password is exposed, and now you've got the same password everywhere, right? So yeah, please still keep different passwords for different different places that you go to.
With respect to emails, one of the biggest thing which has happened is suddenly I get an email from a friend of mine, so called. Now I realize that they are spams, that I'm in trouble, I need this much money. He is not even aware of that.
Correct.
Forget the Nigerian where I won a
Yeah.
lottery and, a lot of people got fished into that 10 years back. But
Yeah.
now, in the last couple of years, what we've seen is some friend his email has got hacked, and a few of his friends, quote, close accomplices, get email saying that I'm in deep trouble right now, I need this much money.
Correct.
How do I know as an outsider whether this is true or not?
Yeah. So this is a fun one. Okay, I'll tell you the fix for this is actually ridiculously simple. Okay, when somebody asks you for money, call them and ask whether you asked for the money. This is not just true at an individual level. This happens in companies as well. In companies, this is called the maker checker model, right? Where the somebody is asking for money, and because there's trust internally, the money just goes. And I think that that's something that should rigorously be put to a test. If there's a single policy that you need to have, is when you're making a transaction, verify the transaction. That's part one. Okay. The second thing is segregation of privileges. Okay. The person making the transaction or creating the transaction should not be the same person who's authorizing the transaction, right? So having that sort of a split also is a good defense. So you don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's basically the theme, right?
And now, regarding the social engineering attacks,
Yeah.
what is social engineering?
So social engineering is basically me using any information that I have against you to pique your interest or to scare you in order for me to get the outcome that I want. Okay, so let's say that I'm after that OTP that we spoke about. I have two possibilities. One is I make friends with you, and then eventually allow you trick you into you giving me the OTP, or I straight up call you and I threaten you, or I send you an email. The mode in which it can be executed is multiple, but the idea is basically using human psychology against an individual to get to your goal, right? And this is by far one of the most commonly used tactics because it's easy to do. It's very very easy. If we have a minute, I just wanted to see if you can hear something from my laptop.
Yes, please go ahead. Yes.
This is if you can still hear me, this is an actual social engineering call. Okay, so let me just pull this up.
Can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but not what's going on the tape.
Let me.
Hi, this is Ravi Das calling from the HR team at the HO.
Can you hear
We
this?
had sent an email regarding employee satisfaction survey. You're one of the people selected.
Sorry, could you hear that?
Yes, absolutely. I could hear that.
Fine. Let me just share my screen. This is a really interesting one.
I can't, are you sharing your screen?
I'm
Please.
just
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Hi, this is Ravi Das calling from the HR team at the HO. We had sent an email regarding employee satisfaction survey. You're one of the people selected from your department, but you haven't filled it up. We haven't got it in our records. There are just 4 questions. Can I just quickly send you that email? Okay, send the email. I'm just sending it. Yeah, it should come through right now. Yeah. Has it come through? Correct. In the PDF file. Correct. No, I'll just open the PDF file. Open. There is a link at our. Just click on the link. Okay. You said I'm one of the 4, eh? Correct. So is this allowed? Like, can I say allow? Yes, please allow. This side. Absolutely. Just checking whether some information security is all okay. No, it's a normal survey we carry out with all. We've been doing it since last 2 years. Okay. Hello. Right. Okay. We need to log in. Yeah, I got it. So login user ID. Correct. So there are 4. Only 2-3 questions. Correct. This is a selected survey for select people. So we would like your honest opinion on these questions. I will be handing up the call. This will complement the Gallup survey? Yes, it does actually. That's what. Okay, what's your name? This is Ravi Das. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
He's already got the password. He's already got the name and the password.
Yep. So I thought that was one of the. I thought that it's a really interesting exercise. Hang on while I put my headphones back on.
Very, very important. Sudarshan, there's a question from the viewers.
Yeah.
Which is, according to you, the best password lock app that you can suggest in the Play Store?
I think so. I personally use LastPass. I use LastPass.
Okay.
But there's also 1Password for iOS. That's a paid version, I think, but it's worth it. I mean, I would go for it. But LastPass is pretty good.
How do I recognize a spam on my email? How do I recognize? I mean, Google helps me, Gmail helps me to find out spam on its own. But how do I recognize this is spam or not? I get my email. Sometimes I get this. If you open that so and so thing has happened, Queen Elizabeth has got so and so. It's a ransomware or whatever, and your computer will crash.
Yeah.
Is there any truth in all that?
Yes. So the topic of ransomware is a particularly dangerous one right now. So Google does a pretty decent job of making sure that malicious content doesn't end up reaching your inbox. But let's say that it's a trusted source. They've been compromised and they've sent you a link. That link looks legit, and you click on it. Okay. What's going to happen with ransomware specifically is you're going to download, just like you saw on this call, right? A PDF file, and that PDF file is actually embedded with malware. Okay. So what happens when you actually are clicking on the PDF file is you're actually executing a program that is embedded there by the hacker. Okay. And once that program starts to execute, all it's going to do is it's going to go through every single file on your computer and do the equivalent of password protecting each and every one of them. Now, this password is there only with the ransomware author or the hacker. And then they're going to ask you for money in order to reveal the password so that you can get your files back. Okay, that's the crux of ransomware. Okay. This has affected individuals, and it has affected small businesses. It has affected big businesses as well. Okay, so nobody is safe from this. Okay, the best defense that you have against ransomware is to back up all your files as an individual. Okay, as I'm talking as an individual. Corporates can do a lot more, but as an individual, make sure that you have your backups. Okay, at least back up the stuff that's important and that has sentimental value to you. You know, might have pictures or whatever, right? In general, you know, or any critical kind of documents that you have, just make sure that you have a copy of those. Okay, uh, because if you get hit with ransomware, the only way to recover that is to pay up.
Wow, 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 wow. And if you have a backup, you tell them to back off.
Yeah, then you just rebuild your machine because you don't care, because you have a backup of
But a
everything.
lot of your information has gone to them. You know, you
No,
have.
it doesn't. That's not how it works. They hold the password. They just keep the key with themselves. Okay. The ones that some corporates face, which is sort of at a much larger scale with much larger payouts, uh, maybe maybe they can have a situation like this. But at an individual level, if you get infected with ransomware, remember that campaign, it's always a campaign that has gone to hundreds of thousands of people spread out all over the globe. Okay, and it's best effort. Click kiya to kiya, right? You know, if I'm lucky, I'm good. So maybe you, doc, won't click on it, but somebody else might, and that person will pay me the money. So it's not a loss that you didn't pay me. Um, the funny part about ransomware is this is a really professional operation. Okay, it's against their interest to not give you their password. So when you pay up, you know, 9 times out of 10 you're going to get the password back, and you will get to decrypt your files. So it's a very professional. You know, they have customer support. You know, they'll answer you on time. They will give you a how-to guide of how to, you know, decrypt all your files and everything. It's insane.
Wow. So it's an organized business.
So organized,
Absolutely
absolutely,
organized business.
absolutely.
And how do I protect myself against that? You know, ransomware. So anybody could hack onto my
Yeah,
computer. It's not that difficult. You know.
yeah. I think there's a few things that you can do. Okay. First thing, like I said, the number one sort of defense against it is to have a backup. That way, you don't care, right? Even if stuff goes, you only have to take the pain of basically, you know, installing your operating system again. Um, Make sure that you have an antivirus running on your machine, especially if you use Windows. You know, you know, Microsoft themselves has something called Windows Defender that just ships with the operating system itself. To keep that on, right? They do a fairly good job. Or you can get one, you know, Symantec, McAfee, whoever, and have that running. And I think in terms of that kind of defense, it's the best I would expect an individual to be able to do. But I really don't have one that's more effective than, you know.
Is it true that my Mac is more safer than using any others on a Windows platform? Is this true? Because my iOS system is better protected than my Android, or you know, my Mac is better than my Mac is rather than a Windows computer.
Okay, so the notion of that actually, again, an interesting way to look at this. Okay, um, people write more malware for Windows because Windows is more widely used. Okay, you're catering to a bigger market. Okay, look, think about the hacker as a person with a job who is working at a company who has a boss. Okay, you have to have an addressable market. Okay, and as such, uh, the amount of effort going into hacking Macs is lesser, and therefore you see disproportionately higher exploits or malware infecting Windows machines simply because they are just used that much more. Uh, now, all operating systems have their vulnerabilities. Uh, there's nothing called 100% secure. Uh, and yes, you know, they have taken steps to make sure that, you know, there are reasonable protection measures in place, but there's nothing really foolproof. What really drives security of, you know, whether one is more secure than the other is just market dynamics in terms of how widely it's distributed.
There's a question from one of our viewers right now. We keep photographs. It's actually self-explanatory. We keep photographs of the credit card front side and the back side.
Yeah.
Is it dangerous? I think it's self-explanatory. It's absolutely self-destructive, and self-demolishing if you keep the photograph of your credit card. Am I right? Go ahead,
Right.
please.
At some point, with a lot of the core, the credit card, sure. I mean, you don't want to have that, but just think about, like, for example, where how many copies of your Aadhaar card and your PAN card have just and your driver's license copies have just been distributed willy nilly. For so many different things. You want to sign up for a gas connection, boom, it's gone. You want to go for a passport, boom, it's gone. Like, and so this information has started spreading everywhere. Okay. um, the responsibility for securing this data actually rests with the people processing this information, right? And as an individual, you have no choice. You have to give your Aadhaar card or your PAN card to get a transaction done. There's really no other way, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I would be a little wary. I would be a little wary when people ask for, like, the front and back, of a copy of a credit card. If somebody's asking you for it, that's definitely something that I would be very, very suspicious about.
How safe is to allow all your data to be on cloud? Now that's another big issue.
Yeah.
Everything on cloud, because backing up my Mac or my computer, multiple hard disk data plus data, and whenever I want to access the hard disk might just pop off. So I feel I'm safer on a cloud. So how good is that cloud service that I should be using?
Okay. Here's the thing with cloud. Okay, cloud is basically like you having your own computer, but it's on the internet, right? Uh, for example, I think something that people might use if you have iPhones is, it's with an iCloud, or you have Google Drive, where you make, you store all your documents. These are all notionally already sitting in the cloud. Okay, they are all sitting in Google's cloud or Apple's cloud, right, or Amazon's cloud, but they're all basically sitting on a computing resource somewhere. Okay. The concern around cloud is not necessarily so much about security as it is about privacy. Okay, sure, there are core security issues in cloud as well, but again, the responsibility for solving those problems is with the person providing the service. Not much the individual can do to influence that. But really, it comes down to privacy. Who's looking at my data? Okay. And right now, there aren't too many protections in place. The Data Privacy Act that's currently in the works, which could be the equivalent of something that Europe put out with GDPR, which basically is a government mandated sort of order to say, this is how companies should be handling customer data, right? So that there aren't motivations that are outside your realm or your visibility that are driving the sale of your data behind your back, right? So a good test for this is, and this is something that you can do if you really want to experiment, right? Get 4 phone numbers, okay, and give that phone number in applications to multiple different places, and you can immediately track down who's actually selling your data, because the phone on which you actually start receiving that call is the place that actually got compromised with your phone number. Sometimes you will start getting it right off the bat, which means that somewhere in the process where you actually even get that phone connection, that data is being swiped and being sold somewhere else, right? So with cloud, typically, I want to say the bigger concern is around privacy. When it comes to your own personal information, the topic is about privacy, whether or not you have control on how your information can be used. And that's where I think some legislation is in the works right now.
What about small businesses? Talk about the examples. Would you have any examples that you've seen, recently? Like today itself, I realized I was reading in the newspaper that one major cybersecurity firm itself got hacked into.
Correct. Okay, so that's pretty big news in the security industry as well. From what we understand, it's a government, supposedly what they call nation state backed or government backed, operation to hack into a US cybersecurity firm. This is the number one threat for really high profile companies. Okay. primarily, I would say, banking, core infrastructure, water, electricity, even possibly healthcare very soon, right? Uh, what, why are these, sort of operations happening, and how do they actually happen? Okay. Remember one thing once again, to repeat what I've said before. You have to think about the hacker as a person who works at a company, who has a boss and who has targets to meet. Okay. And when they plan something like this, it goes through the same project management phases that you would if you were to do any other type of project. If you're building software, or in your case, you're doing a surgery, right? Like you have this blueprint of, here's what we're going to do, and this is our plan of action, and that's how they operate. What these people do is they get extensive research about their target. Okay, so there's a whole lot of information, what you call reconnaissance activity that happens, so that they know the company inside out. They know who the employees are. They know, they'll scour the internet. They'll get as many email addresses as possible. They will look at through social media, and then they will see, like, okay, what are this person's interests, and they'll pick a target, right? And then they will hone in on that target, and they will send them that same PDF file kind of exploit that we showed earlier. They will send that, and they will count on the fact that somebody is going to click on it. Okay. Once you click on that, okay, let's take the example of something like the financial industry, which is going to be a very interesting use case to talk about, right? What would you be after if you were to try to hack into the bank? Okay. Turns out that in recent times, one of the most interesting systems that's there inside a bank is what you call a SWIFT system. Okay. What the SWIFT system does is it basically brokers international transactions. Okay. So, if you're transferring money from here to a bank in the US or any other place in the world, that transaction gets routed through SWIFT. Okay. So you're talking, basically businesses moving money. So it's big money. Okay. This is huge money. Okay. We're talking in the order of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars at a time. Okay. This SWIFT system is actually just a computer. It's like a Windows machine or a Linux machine, right? It's just a machine. Okay. So if you can get the username and password to the SWIFT machine, you're basically now sitting on a system that's the brokering of transactions. Now, what can you do, and what has been done? Okay. This has happened in the past. Sure, SWIFT has already done, taken a bunch of measures to actually improve this. But this is what happened in the past. Okay. A transaction hits the SWIFT system. Now, what the hackers have done is they've deployed software on this machine that takes the transaction and basically, takes it off the audit trail, and they change the destination to which this transaction is going to go to. Okay, so for example, this might go to a shell account in the Cayman Islands, and from the Cayman Islands, the money gets distributed. And the money is basically gone, and there is no way to get it back. Okay, and it all started because way up the chain, somebody clicked on that PDF file. They clicked on that PDF file. A malware got deployed inside the bank. That malware, or the hacker is now using his software to move from system to system inside the bank until he gets the username and password to log into the SWIFT server, where he goes in and then starts brokering the transactions. Okay, you can't even reconcile these transactions at the end of the day because there's no trail of them ever happening. Okay, so the highest profile one was the attack against Bank of Bangladesh. So they made away with $100 million. So the question that comes down to is, right, if you were a hacker and you had to spend 1 year trying to figure out how to hack a bank, but the payout at the end of it is $100 million, would you do it?
Why not?
Why not? Right? And that's the motivation that really drives. At the end of the day, you really have to look, how's the money being made?
Yeah.
And if you can figure that out.
I know a corollary to this, I'm suddenly reminded of the great thing, the virus which the Americans put in the Iranian computer.
Yeah.
And gradually, slowly, the malware just made the nuclear reactor dysfunctional.
Correct.
And this was over a coffee in McDonald's somewhere from which the malware went without physically attacking. The
Yeah,
whole thing went into a toss.
yeah,
Amazing. What you're saying is this kind of hacking
yeah.
happening.
It's the exact same principle. Remember, it starts with a click. Malware enters a place, then it starts spreading to all the other systems around it. Very funnily, you can almost take a pandemic kind of kind of analogy over here. It started with one person and then it kept spreading and spreading, right? And eventually, it's now a global thing, and it's literally exactly how malware spreads. It's literally
Any
exactly how.
interesting examples that you've seen in the last 6 months, 1 year? What some so that we can learn from those examples. Something that strikes you.
Yeah, ransomware has been very, very hot. We already spoke about ransomware, but in the last 6 months, ransomware attacks have gone pretty much off the charts, and even the sophistication with which these are being executed is extremely high. Um, the ransomware has entered the organization through a similar technique, like somebody clicked on a link, they downloaded, opened a file, and that file triggered the ransomware. And what that ransomware had the capability of doing is it knew how to figure out where all the other systems are. Okay, it knew how to figure out how to get the passwords to log into those systems. So it collected these passwords, logged into the other system, copied itself there, encrypted all the files, and kept moving on that way until literally the whole organization was gone, uh, and all operations stopped for days on end. Okay, so we had to go in and try to figure out how do you stop this thing from spreading even further. We sort of went in midway. How do you prevent this from spreading even further? How do you try to get the data back? And like I said, in some cases backups were there, in some cases they weren't, in which case unfortunately you have to pay up. And we really went into help to figure out how do you prevent this from happening again. What are the sort of the best defenses that you can put in place that would prevent such a thing from happening. And that's where a lot of the stuff that we are working on at Smokescreen also, the company that I'm working for, is we are really trying to figure that out, and we've gone a decent way into doing it.
Sudarshan, the other thing, people left, right, and center put up their photographs on Instagram, Facebook, identity theft, and you could be morphed today. Photoshopping is so very simple.
Yeah.
And so, what is it that you would like to tell people putting up their photographs on Instagram, first Facebook, and then you could be taken into some scandalous positions, and you could be blackmailed somewhere along the line?
Correct. Um, I'll answer this in two parts. One, something that you can do at an individual level. Okay, at an individual level, our brain is wired to get immediate feedback, right? Like the quick hit of dopamine. Okay, and what happens as a result of that is just taking a moment and really thinking about what it is that you're about to do and how it might impact sort of your long-term life is really key to this. Just take that pause before you put something out there. Once it's out on the internet, nobody can bring it back down. Okay, nobody can do it. Okay, people can manage the situation, okay, but it will stay there forever. Okay, and this is really hard to communicate, especially with kids who are just getting their phones now, because they don't have the necessary experience, and so guidance really helps in this matter. But remember this fundamental thing, once it's out there on the internet, it is going to be there forever. So think about what might happen. For example, if 10 years down the line you're applying for a job and this thing shows up, uh, you're wasted at a party, right? And the video of that is online, right? That's something that maybe you don't want to be putting out there, right? And so just taking rational calls, just because your phone is right there with you, to not necessarily be instinctive with it. The second thing is know what avenues are available if you're at the receiving end of something. Okay.
So what you are saying essentially is that you are, and you only solely are responsible for giving all that nonsense. You be careful, you censor yourself and your urges to get instant dopamine. Because the more you put it on, the more chances that you would be smuggled into later.
Yeah, I mean, once the data is out there, it's not necessarily even a matter of you censoring yourself per se. Yeah, you can put up photos. You just be a little more pragmatic about it. The second thing is, if some things were to go wrong, and there are situations where obviously you've spoken about situations like bullying and morphing, right, which are out of your control. Okay, I would strongly encourage that you don't suffer in silence with yourself. Okay, because there's a certain shame and a stigma attached to this. uh, but to really reach out for help, right? So if as a starting point, like, hey, there's a Mumbai cyber cell, know how to contact them. Okay, um, there's folks like me who you can reach out to on Facebook. There's security professionals who can help you with what can be possible, what's the right course of action. But also making this conversation a little more mainstream is definitely going to help, because at the end of the day, if you want to have an infrastructure that's going to support millions of youth that are you know uh, you know flirting with this danger right now, we need to have a much stronger infrastructure, that's coming from the government, that's coming from non-profits, to be able to for us to manage this at scale. But the first thing is, don't keep it to yourself. Share that this problem is happening with whoever you feel comfortable, so that solutions can be found.
You are safe to go to the Mumbai cybercrime police. You have worked in
Yeah,
tandem with the police in the past.
yeah, and they are there to help you, right?
In fact,
uh,
our ex-police commissioner and DG D. Sivanandan
yeah,
used to have a cyber security. He's one of the guys who started
yeah,
earliest in Thana way back 10,
yeah,
15 years ago.
yeah,
And he had a firm for himself. And that's something very interesting,
correct.
that there is recourse. You can go to the Mumbai police cyber security.
Yeah, yeah. But most importantly, share it first with somebody you trust. That's basically the crux.
What about your surfing history, abuse and misuse of your people selling data on that? This is what Amazon wants, and Facebook wants that. How much are you surfing? Where are you spending time?
Yeah. There's a new documentary that's out on Netflix that encapsulates this problem pretty well. The name slips me right now, but uh, the idea really is that pretty much every single thing that you're doing on the internet is tracked. Okay, that's how the ads that you get are different from the ads that I get, because they know what preferences I have and what preferences you have. And yeah, somebody or the other always knows where you're going, right? And it's usually uh, again, this is a privacy problem again. Okay, um, this can be solved in to some extent by using more privacy centric browsers. uh, it's still not very easily consumable, but if you use stuff like in general, Apple prides itself on privacy. So Apple has a strong privacy game. Firefox
DuckDuckGo.
is a browser.
Firefox, DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, and DuckDuckGo. So yeah, we have a guy in the company who pretty much uses DuckDuckGo the whole time, so that at least the search aspect of it is taken care of.
How do I put firewalls? Just give a little understanding about firewalls.
Yeah, so firewalls are already there by default. For regular people, right? If you have a machine, it's already on by default. If you have a computer at home, okay. What the firewall basically does is, you remember when I said that, for example, malware comes into a system and then moves to other systems. They can only do that if the firewall is not on. Okay, if it's not on, you will not see the firewall. Okay, you're increasing your risk that malware from elsewhere can come and infect your computer. And the firewall basically does says, this is a black box, nobody can enter this. I'm going to keep all outside connections from coming in, and that's absolutely not going to
So
happen.
you mean to say firewall is a default function in every laptop or computer that you have,
Yes,
and
yes.
we have to switch it off if I want to get off? Is that what we do?
Yeah. So you'll be reducing security if you switch it off. I would strongly recommend that you don't.
How do I check whether it's on or not?
If you are on Windows, which I guess most of the people are, you can just go to the bottom left and just type firewall. Uh, okay, and it'll pop up like Windows firewall. So you click on that, and it should all be green.
Okay.
And if it's green, it says, and it will say that the firewall is on.
Any other interesting examples that you would like to quote about, and some good messages for take-home messages for the audience right now?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of examples, I showed you one interesting one. Let me share another.
Yes.
Let me share you with something pretty interesting with you again. I, so I thought this is an interesting one because it's a visual exercise. Okay, um, it's a tactic that people use to do essentially what is called social engineering, which we discussed. Okay, to trick you into basically giving the information that they need, right? To trick you into opening a document or clicking on a link. Um, these are all variations on the word Microsoft. Okay, but some of them are. Can you spot the ones that are not Microsoft?
Yeah, Rajan Desai at Microsoft. The full thing on the right side is wrong. Is not at my
No,
www.microsoft.com.
so this is an email address. Okay, so imagine that you are communicating with somebody from Microsoft. Okay, and you get this email from you're communicating with a Rajan Desai in Microsoft. Okay,
SOTF. SOTF.com.
so there's an SOTF.
Yes.
Okay, this is actually an R and an N put
Yes.
together.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
in some cases, this SOTF is another one. So you can see how visually it messes with you. So I could send you something like this and say, hey doc, why don't you go and download this thing from the Microsoft website? But actually, what I'm sending is RNICROSOFT. I can make it look exactly right now. There isn't one. I just clicked on it.
But that's another thing which we get, those mails from Amazon. Suddenly 75% sale on Amazon, flash sale. And it's actually leading to some other site.
Yeah. Okay. So you asked me for an interesting one. I just remembered a really interesting one.
Yes.
Okay. I was investigating a phishing campaign that hit one of my customers a couple of years ago, and what happened in that was it was a phishing email that said your Amazon invoice for your purchase is attached. Okay, and there was a PDF file associated with it. Okay, now what I realized is at this point of time, humanity exists in two states. They have either ordered something from Microsoft or they haven't. Okay, so so what happens is when you see that email, you either haven't ordered anything, in which case you go like, what did I even order? And you open that file, or you say, oh, I've ordered something, let me see the invoice, and then you open that file. And the moment you open that file, the malware gets deployed. Okay, now when you looked at this file, I mean, it was a professional job. You couldn't tell, like, just to the inexperienced eye, you would not see a difference between the invoices at all. Like the two emails, exactly alike. Okay, just the nuance of the fact that this part of the email address is the one that was tampered with. But even the name with which it shows up in your inbox, everything, I mean, perfect. Like they got it down, and that's how they were successful.
Oh, fantastic. Anything else coming to your mind that we should be taking care of? And phishing, how today young females, young teenage females are taken into child prostitution and things of that kind. And we are fished into another fish. And what would you like to take a few words before we end this program?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just urge caution when you communicate. So when you get an email, okay, and the email has got any threatening content or anything like that, right? To the question that you're asking, always open up to see the full email address and really analyze it to see whether it's coming from somebody who you trust or somebody who you know, and then proceed to interact with the email. If necessary, follow up with a phone call, depending upon what it is. But in general, if you're in a situation where you're getting this kind of emails, just bring it up. just talk to somebody about it, because there are things that can be done, but it would be beyond the capability of somebody who's just experiencing this to be able to respond to it, in a manner that has to be responded like appropriately. So
Sudarshan, before I depart, just wanted to ask you, my camera could be
yeah,
my enemy on my laptop, on my phone, because I've seen Mark Zuckerberg's thing, he covers his camera himself.
correct. Yeah.
Yes. So tell me, how safe am I? Because I'm full time moving with my cell phone with a
Yeah.
camera on. Is it being taped? Because I realized something more in Google.
Yeah.
If I have spoken about the jewels in the queen's crown, suddenly when I'm asking Google, it knows, despite my phone being off, switched off, it will figure out without the net there. Still, it will come and ask me when I'm going on that. It'll come with the immediate answers on that. So is it listening? Is everything that we are talking, is Google listening somewhere like Alexa?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let me tell you that for sure. If you have Google Home and Alexa, and I have both, okay, it's definitely listening. Okay. Uh, it it's definitely, and there have been a few reports of the fact that it's been listening more than it should. Okay. Uh, to the sum total of your answer to your question is, can somebody switch on my camera and spy on me? Um, Technically, yes. I mean, it's super simple. It uses the same fundamental, which I spoke about earlier. Once you have that software or malware installed on your system, anything is possible. Okay, the camera will turn on, the audio can be recorded. Um, all of that is possible. The question that you need to consider is, uh, why would somebody want to listen to you, whether it's part of whether you're somebody who's an HNI, and so you have material information, and that material information is important to somebody, or it's a part of a larger campaign where they've just sprayed this out and they're just hearing what they can. uh, the answer to that question is yes. If you end up having the bad luck to interact with something like this, yes, it can. I know that because as part of my job, one of the things that I'm told to do to prove that I've actually hacked in is I would have to go on and, for example, turn on the CEO's webcam.
Wow. Wow.
And the way you accomplish that is, broadly using the technique that I spoke to you about.
So I'm going to be scared this night, yeah. So Darshan, all my data and all my laptop, everything that you have been talking with in last 1 hour, a lot of people are going to get their hacks today
Yeah.
from you.
You know,
Just to prove a point from your.
yeah. So I'll tell you what. Just as a this is where I my colleague Ravi, at Smokestein, he has this thing where he says being anonymous is the future.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't draw attention to yourself, right? Stay off the radar, and then hope for the best.
And hope for the best. Yeah, some of the smartest, richest guys are at places where there is no internet, there is no accessibility, there is no GPRS to track them where they are. So I'm totally
Yeah.
agreeing with you on that.
Yeah, but everybody around them has all of those things. So
Yeah.
you're never safe. You're never alone that way.
Anything else before we wind up, Sadarshan? That you'd like, any interesting example and some
Yeah.
tips for people to take care of?
Yeah, I just thought that to close out, I'll quickly talk about what's the tactic that we're actually working on. It's an interesting one. It'll take a couple of minutes if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We have short the time, but we will do it quickly.
yeah. Okay. Cool. So basically, what happens is there's this pot of gold, right? Which is what which is what the hacker is after. Okay. This pot of gold can be anything, right? In any company or for you personally. And this is bad guy who's trying to get to it. Okay. Now you put whatever certain protections in place. Okay. But the hacker still always finds a way around. Okay. So you can see that the hacker has figured out that this is the best way for me to evade all the security defenses and eventually just get to this point, right, where I can steal the gold. So what we are working on is what's called deception technology. Okay. And what we are trying to do is flip the game by using the mentality of the attacker against him. What we do is we place multiple pots of gold, okay, that look identical, and only one's real, the rest of them are fake. And the fakes have a property that if you so much as interact with them, if you touch them, it's going to generate an alarm, okay, which will reveal the presence of an attacker. So the attacker is now completely confused. They have no idea. And if you even remove other forms of defenses, you still can't tell which one's the real pot of gold, right? And he would have to trigger one of the alarms before he actually gets there. So we're utilizing an interesting concept called deception to be able to really do this. So in the case of ransomware, what we're doing is we're putting fake files everywhere that nobody should be interacting with, nobody should be opening it. So if the ransomware actually, tries to encrypt one of our files, we immediately find out about it and we can stop the ransomware from spreading further. That's what we're doing.
Brilliant. That's a very smart idea, using their own tactics against them.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Absolutely fantastic. Lot of information that we could get.
Yep.
Thanks very much for spending your time with us and helping us to understand this very complex thing that is called cyberspace.
Yep.
It's still absolutely, we just got a little eye opener, but for more details, we are going to get you back again because identity theft, the biggest thing which is happening in the world, your people with green card and people who have their own social security numbers, they're being hacked. This is like a huge problem everywhere. To me, it's Aadhaar card here and it's so freely available everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely, Doc. So each one of the things that we spoke about can be a 1 hour conversation by itself. So always we'll be happy to speak again.
We're going to get you back again. This was just to start the small presentation at Ticklish just to understand how can I increase my security with common sense.
Yeah.
And that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
For giving us so much of wisdom and for your amount of wisdom that you have to make us understand simple stuff, changing your password, what kind of password, where to protect your password, which is a spam mail. If you get, just call up a simple thing. Don't suddenly trust anybody. Look at the mail.com. Just be very clear. Just go through it slowly and it's not all that bad.
Yeah.
And God forbid if you get into trouble, you have Sudarshan and or you have the cyber crime space with the Mumbai Police to help you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Friends, next week we have something very interesting in this telecom revolution that we have. Huge amount of revolution which has happened with Jio and the 5G which is coming in. We have Mr. Sunil Dutt next week at 8:30 sharp in Mirror Wisdom Reflected, President Devices in Reliance Jio Infocom, a very learned man from BlackBerry, huge knowledge about the domain space on absolute what's going to be happening in 4G, 5G, the Google car which will come, what is communication and the huge revolution that Jio has brought about in the amount of communication that we had to the remotest possible area in India, where a small farmer or a small person also knows what's happening in Bombay. They know what's going on everywhere, and that is the amount of revolution which has happened in this country. We will see the effect of this revolution maybe in the next few years coming down from banking to every possible sector. And to get us more into what's going on, what are the future plans that Jio might have or the telecom market has, we have Mr. Sunil Dutt, a very learned person from Jio, who's the president there. Looking forward to meeting you next week, and thanks for being with us this week. Thanks so much. A great information from Sudarshan. Good night for now, and I would like to thank Ashok Kumar and Navneet Kumar. Ashok, if you are there, I would like to thank you for your presence.
Thank you, sir.
Navneet, thank you. It was very interesting.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for all your support always to see that the whole streaming goes online. And it took a little longer time because it's so very important that we understand cyber security. It's absolutely no new domain. We are not aware of it.
True, Doctor.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Sudarshan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.